My name's Jenna Little, and this is my analysis of a quality initiative project. So the issue I identified were patients that were not retaining education on when to make a follow-up appointment. This means that they were not retaining education about potential complications that could arise and when they needed to be seen in the office. So one example that I had was a pediatric patient who had tubes put in his ears, and they had been draining for about 45 days. Well, the teaching is if it continues to drain for over a week, then the nurse practitioner really needs to see you back in the office. So that whole situation could have been avoided if the parents would have known that and they would have came in a little bit sooner. We could have avoided some of the things we had to do that day to help this patient out. We had to suction out his ear. He had to be put on a medication. So if he would have come in a little bit sooner, then maybe some of that could have been avoided. Another example was a patient who actually had a procedure done on her nose with her septum, and she had suffered from a massive nosebleed while at home, and for some reason did not come into the office. So whenever she did show up, the nurse practitioner had to kind of evacuate the blood clot, and this caused another massive bleed. And that appointment ended up taking close to 2 hours to really get that under control. So if she had come in sooner, then some of those complications could have also been avoided. The model I chose for this is the Technological Innovations and a Plan, Do, Study Act. So I kind of did two just because this model that I'm using is going to incorporate some technology, and then also I will use a Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle just to test the change. So what I'm going to be using is mobile health, and that's the application of mobile technologies, including phones, tablets, telemonitoring, tracking devices that all support and enhance performance of healthcare. For the model application phase of this change project, the patients will be given a reminder text or call, depending on their preference, 24 hours after a procedure. So this was an ENT office that offered a lot of different procedures. The most common ones I saw were tubes for pediatric patients and tonsillectomies. So what the text would include would be education and when to call the office for any type of potential complications, and when to seek emergency care, and a number or a link to schedule an appointment through the patient portal. Next, to actually track the change, I'll use the Plan, Do, Study, Act method. So for this change, the plan phase is probably going to take the longest. That's going to require finding a text message system, kind of performing that cost analysis to see how much is this going to cost, obtaining informed consent from patients, and then go ahead and creating the text messages that are going to be catered to each specific procedure. In the do cycle, we're going to pilot the study and we're going to start to make changes on a small scale. So my plan for this would be to start with just texting out like one cohort of patients. So maybe just the parents of kids who had the tubes put in their ears. And then in the study phase, I'm going to gather some data using interviews with the patients, the parents, and then collecting some data on a run chart to see how many appointments do I have where there were complications and they didn't come in to the office soon enough, or how many missed follow-up appointments did I have, something like that. And then in the act phase, I'll end up making small changes based on my data and hopefully start to increase the size and scope of the project. This slide goes over Cotter's 8 stages of change. The first one is create urgency. So create a sense of here's the issue and here's why we're going to change it now. Form the team, so kind of figure out who's going to be on board, who all do I need to have on board for this project. For me, I'm going to need basically everyone in my office, administrative, tech, IT people, people that can help with that, the behind the scenes stuff. Create the vision, so try to communicate to everybody the project and where I see it going, the text messaging reminders, education, kind of including the whys behind everything that I'm wanting to do. So that would be communicating the vision, and then removing obstacles would be finding out what's going to stand in the way. For this project, I could see some issues with HIPAA, privacy, informed consent, financial issues, and maybe legal issues with working with an outside company to kind of implement the text messaging service. To create short-term wins, that just means to celebrate those little things when you do reach a certain milestone in the project, to acknowledge that you're having those wins, to kind of keep everyone on board and continuing to build that change, to continue to see the vision. And then finally, after you do build the change and it's implemented, then you want to make sure that the changes you made are anchored in the culture and that people will continue to use this method and we're not going to resort back to the old ways. So this model can actually be incorporated into primary care as well. A few ways that mobile health can be used in the primary care setting include daily reminders for medications, appointment reminders, and support for chronic health conditions. In a study that I found, they actually used 40 insulin-treated adolescents and young adults that had diabetes, and they started to implement electronic reminders to check their blood glucose levels. And the participants could reply with the blood glucose level, and this was actually processed by a system called CARDS, which stand for Computerized Automated Reminder Diabetes System. The results were that during the first month, cell phone users submitted twice as many blood glucose results as email users. So this concluded that using cell phone messaging to promote blood glucose monitoring was a viable method in adolescents with diabetes. To include one more example, I actually decided to use an example from a study that was testing use of text messaging to increase attendance in primary care. So the problem they had was attendance rates were very poor and there were many missed appointments. The intervention included text message and mobile phone reminders. Then those occurred 24 to 48 hours before the appointment. And they concluded that the text message reminder system was effective in improving attendance rates in primary care. And actually, they included that the text messaging group had higher rates of attendance than the mobile phone reminder group. So it really goes to show that the texting can sometimes be more effective than calling.